And on today's show, why deferred compensation plans can offer solutions to business owners. Part 2 of this week's series on deferred compensation with Regional Vice President of Business Owner and Executive Solutions, Sherry Flint. Hi everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and contributing author to Backroom Technician and InSmart. Let's get down to business. Well, welcome to day 2, Sherry.
Thanks, Steve.
Well, we're talking about your world. I mean, this is your world. I'm just visiting, I'm just kind of saying hello and what's going on. And I have to say, I want to talk a little bit about today. There's deferred comp for profit organizations. There's deferred comp for nonprofit organizations. And the only reason I want to put a little underlining under that is because most of the people that I talk to and everything I see out on Google basically says it's all, are we doing an S Corp, an LLC? Are we doing a C Corp partnership? I don't see hardly anybody addressing deferred comp for nonprofits. So that to me was kind of maybe an unsung hero, a place we need to go.
Absolutely. I actually broke it down into 4 categories so we could reference it. There's 4 different types, as you mentioned. We have for-profit plans and nonprofit plans, and in those categories, we have both defined contribution and defined benefit plans. Now, one day this week, we're going to spend a whole segment on nonprofit opportunities because that is alive and well. We see a lot of activity in the nonprofit space. Today, we're going to spend most of our time in the for-profit space, our excess plans. Those are called 401k mirrors, 401k excess, traditional deferred compensation plans. That is where we see the most activity in the marketplace because there's just more C corporations and S corporations looking for these types of solutions. When
I'm looking, and I know we're going to stay on nonprofit in another series, but I think that's going to be one that you'll not want to miss just because I think people didn't really think that through. I don't see much out on Google on that. Now, when we're talking about we're talking about traditional defined contribution and defined benefit plans. How does this work when you're actually dovetailing in on a deferred compensation plan?
Well, first what we do is we talk to the employer and figure out what is it that's making you look into a non-qualified plan. We talked on a previous segment that a lot of companies fail their 401k testing, so they're looking for ways to help individuals save over and above the 401k limits. So oftentimes the defined contribution plan is a great solution for that because each person can decide each year how much they want to save and when they want that money back, whether it's college or savings or retirement or a vacation home. The defined benefit plans really, they don't come up very often, but let's say you have those 2 or 3 executives that you just can't live without. So in addition to a defined contribution plan where they may want to put their own money in, we may actually provide them a guaranteed benefit, or I shouldn't use the word guaranteed, a benefit down the road. For example, Steve, if you stick around with me for 10 years, I'm going to guarantee you $800,000 at the end of 10 years. And that could be a defined benefit type of plan design. But more often than not, we're seeing defined contribution plans used for not only employee contributions, but also employer contributions as well.
Okay, so let's say my employer loves me, and hopefully my sponsor does. Let's say he appreciates me, and I say to him, gee, I'm willing to, sign on for the next 5 years, and I'm going to defer some of my compensation. But you keep bringing up this issue of vesting schedule. Now, that means a portion every year becomes available if I walked before that period. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
You can do that. So you're always vested in your own contribution. So that's an employee deferral decision. But if the employer puts a contribution in there, it could be in the form of a match, it could be incentive compensation, it could be a golden handcuff. They can decide how and when they vest it. So for example, I could say, Steve, I'm going to give you $50,000 every year for the next 10 years, and I'm going to invest it in 10 years, 100% vested in 10 years. Or I could say, every time I give you a contribution, I'm going to vest it a third every 3 years. So you could have a rolling type of vesting schedule. So it just depends on what the employer is trying to accomplish and what type of golden handcuff they're looking for.
It sounds like you could really customize this.
Oh, they're all custom.
Very flexible.
They're all very flexible, and the key is sitting down with the employer and figuring out what's important to them, and that way we can design it specifically for their company.
Do you have another one you wanted to look at here?
Yes.
Now, walk me through this. I love this slide.
Well, we talked a little bit about who's a good prospect. So we see, a lot of public companies already have deferred compensation. They're very well entrenched there. But we do see a lot of C corporations, companies with 100 or more employees, that middle kind of small to medium business owner are also looking for ways to attract and retain key talent. We see S corporations. We're going to talk about 457 and for tax-exempt organizations later. But what we're looking for are companies that have been around for a while, have good cash flow, they're stable, they have a long history, and oftentimes if they're failing their discrimination testing on the 401k plan, they make a good candidate. We're looking for companies that want to help their employees save over and above the 401k limit. And you mentioned something earlier that's really important. They need to want to have a solution. Deferred comp is not a great fit for everybody, but it is one solution that oftentimes an advisor can look at to help the employer overcome the 401k limitations.
Well, I think the dominant retirement language is all ERISA. And it's all under deferred, defined benefit and defined contribution. So we're bringing, I think we're resurrecting something that used to be standard in the 90s when I was in the business. Now I'm seeing it come back. And I think this is just not, I don't want to even say another arrow in your quiver, because if I have too many arrows, I'll not use them, right? I think this is to get into new territory, to new organizations to get into. This is where I see the play, because I don't think it's dominated yet. I don't see that many people talking about deferred comp.
I agree with you. You know, deferred compensation plans have been around for 20 years, but they have dramatically changed over time. We have plan sponsors that come to us and say, you know what, I'm failing my discrimination testing. I have highly comps that need to save money for retirement. And you know what, they're getting killed on taxes. What do you have? So I think for every advisor that's working with business owners out there, whether they're large or small, this should be something that they're looking at as part of their solutions.
When we come back from the break, we're going to hone in a little bit more. We're going to talk about the definitions of non-qualified deferred comp and kind of get Sherry's twist on it. We'll be right back after the break. Back in the day, life insurance professionals were called field underwriters. Then, carriers trained their field force in the basics of life insurance underwriting. Today, the insurance industry doesn't educate the agent population as they once did. But now you can have the Informed Risk Guide at your fingertips, so you can illustrate a reasonable rate class for your life insurance prospects. Just request your copy of the Informed Risk Guide at downtobusiness.ashbrokerage.com. It's free from Ash Brokerage, the practice enhancement company. Well, welcome back to the break. Sherry, I want to talk to you about definitions, because I think out on the web, I've noticed we're mixing terms up. Like, people are talking about life insurance just as a standalone, here's a supplemental retirement plan, and that isn't deferred comp. So could you give us a little bit of deferred comp definition? Give us a little Webster's angle on this.
Absolutely. So non-qualified plans is a general term used for everything not qualified. And so there's two types. There's pre-tax and there's post-tax. A 162 bonus plan is a great example of an after-tax solution. When we say deferred compensation plans, it's any type of pre-tax plan. So it could be a 401k excess plan, it could be a 401k mirror plan, it could be a traditional CERT plan where the employer is putting in supplemental retirement contributions. They all fall under the category of deferred compensation. Today, what we've been spending most of our time on is a 401k supplemental plan or an excess plan. So a plan that allows participants to save over and above the 401k limits, and that would also allow the employer to make discretionary employer contributions and or matches based on the individual performance or the plan design.
When I'm looking at the consideration, because you just named quite a few there, and they have their fit in certain scenarios. Do you have something, if I want to give this away on the show, do you have something I could give away that it actually breaks out those different plans and gives a little definition? Again, if you say, Steve, I'd like to know everything that Sherry just said in a nice format on a PowerPoint, right? Just write me at steve@downtobusiness.tv and I'll send it to you, because I think I want to really resurrect the idea of talking about deferred comp, getting it on the table, and using this as a tactical penetration into the business market. I see this as a huge idea. Talk about, what kind of participants, when I'm considering participants in companies, who am I looking at?
That's a great question. Historically, when we look back 10, 15 years, we saw deferred compensation plans as being only for the elite C-suite, right? Now what we're seeing is employers are saying, you know what, let's look at our mid-level management and about directors, sales folks, and we can actually include independent contractors as well. So if you have...
Wait a minute, 1099?
1099 independent contractors can participate.
As a deferred comp?
Absolutely.
Wow, that just stretched me, I think. My thinking, wow. Okay, so you could even add that. Now, let's say a company sees the value of going, instead of staying at their highly compensated employees, you're saying now we're down to middle management. That's a whole, that's actually a bigger demographic.
Absolutely. And so oftentimes what we see is employers saying, let's look at our population of individuals that are highly compensated. The definition is typically those that make $115,000 or more per year. The rules are you can't include more than 10% of your W-2 employees in the plan. It has to be discretionary, it has to be discriminatory. But within that group, you could actually have different benefits for different levels of employees. So for example, everybody over 115,000 can defer whatever, 50% of their compensation, 100% of their base or 50% of their bonus, however you want to structure it. But then maybe we get to the C-suite level, maybe we say, you know what, for those we're going to make a discretionary employer match. So employers can actually customize benefits based on the size and the demographics of their employee population.
I guess if I was going to do this, and I'm just trying to think of the employee, what is the credit worthiness of my company? Because, you know, I'm actually taking my comp that I actually worked for, I'm deferring it into the future. Who actually owns that account? Does my company own it? Do I own it? If they got in trouble, would my deferred comp be in trouble?
That's a very important consideration. Basically, deferred compensation is a corporate IOU. If I participate in your plan, I'm essentially saying, hold on to my money and pay it to me later with interest. And so I'm very concerned about the credit worthiness of the company. The larger the company and the longer they've been around and the better their cash flow, the more likely they are to participate. Now, I always had one rule. If the top individuals in the organization aren't participating, neither am I. And so oftentimes we see that behavior from the top down. If the entire C-suite, the president, the CEO, the CFO, all the highly comps are participating, you know what? I think they know what's going on with the corporation. But generally speaking, you shouldn't invite people into the plan that don't understand the risk of being in a non-qualified plan.
And also, I would just think about if the company, for some reason, got into some kind of litigation and they came after the financial side of that equation.
Absolutely.
Is that an issue?
Absolutely. You're a creditor of the company.
So is there any way to protect yourself as an employee in a deferred comp contract like that?
Well, you really can't protect your asset. There's a couple things that you can do. First of all, the company can say, you know what, we're going to segregate the asset. We're going to put a trust in place so that money can only be used for two things, to pay participants or creditor claims. So it doesn't eliminate the creditor risk. The other thing that we talked about in an earlier segment is participants can have what we call in-service distributions. So I might say, I'm going to defer some of my money, but I want some back in 5 years, some back in 10 years, some back in 15 years. So I'm never very far from my money. And of course, you know, at the end of the day, you can always quit to take your contribution. Not necessarily a solution that we're looking for.
Oh, no. Well, so let's just think about this now. Have you seen in your travels, you've been in this thing so long, are there certain corporations that are ideal to talk this way? Really ideal?
Yeah, I would say companies with 150 employees or more failing their discrimination testing. I know I keep coming back to that.
It's big though.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the driving factors. Companies where they have, 10 or more individuals making 150,000, individuals that are in high income tax brackets, especially states with high income tax brackets, individuals that get discretionary employer bonuses, right? They might have some extra money they want to defer on a pre-tax basis. So I would say that's the segment I typically look at as a good prospect.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Remember, before moving forward with any of the ideas on the show, always consult your tax advisor, legal counsel, or your broker-dealer compliance officer. Missed an episode? Just hop out to our site at downtobusiness.ashbrokerage.com. Want to email me? steve@downtobusiness.tv. And remember, you could be wiser as an Ash Brokerage advisor. I'm Steve Savant. We'll see you tomorrow.